eNCA's focus today is on the state of our democracy. Does government have a game plan for a reimagined future? Why are there so many failures in our systems? Does cadre deployment even have a place in our democracy? Are we going to be able to handle the consequences should this democracy fail? And who should be held accountable? Those are some of the questions that we're posing. And Spamandla Mhlongo, of course, joining us this morning from Democracy Development Program. Thank you for your time, Spamandla, and good morning to you. What's your perspective on the state of our democracy today?
Good morning, Tumelo, and the viewers. Essentially, from our perspective, is that whilst we are having quite a few challenges insofar as engaging with the different processes related to our democracy, which are transparency, accountability, and the sort of consequence management that you'd like to see in a mature democracy, especially one that requires representative factions or representative parts of our democracy to be functioning well and in the interest of society. I still do think that it's still salvageable. There's still a lot of institutions that still are willing to do the work in order to be able to salvage some of the various aspects of our democracy. A large part of the failures of our democracy is not necessarily in terms of the institutions themselves, but it's about who do we put in those positions in order to be able to carry out the intentions both of our constitution, but also the intentions of our society as a whole.
And perhaps give us, share some examples of those institutions, because oftentimes the political will has been questioned by certain, individuals and, leaders in our country, whether there's even political will to see through our democracy. Perhaps share those institutions that you feel are actually doing the work.
So if you look at, for instance, the sort of revelations we've seen out of this SIU, for instance, insofar as investigating the various aspects of corruption, much of that work would not be happening if we were genuinely in a space where our democracy was not functioning in a meaningful way. Some of the work of Chapter 9 institutions, including the Public Protector itself, goes to show that there are institutions who are still willing to do the work. Of course, we do recognize that there are gaps insofar as the efficiency and proficiency of those institutions. But what's more missing is seeing the effect of once an investigation has been undertaken into corruption or into acts of corruption or allegations thereof. What's the work that has to be done then from National Assembly in particular? A lot of the sort of discomfort around whether our democracy is genuinely functioning within the scope and is about who we've elected to represent us. And if we were to be honest about the National Assembly and its work insofar as holding accountable various individuals who are affected by allegations of corruption, we'd say that that part specifically has not done its work and has not come up and done the work that's necessary in order to inspire South Africans. Most South Africans don't interact on a daily basis with institutions such as Chapter 9 institutions. But if they see, for instance, that our National Assembly, the people that we've elected to represent us, seem to have a flagrant disregard for the institutions that they are meant to be protecting, that's when we'll have a crisis of our democracy, when people will choose to not engage themselves in our democracy. And of course, we've seen that in the low voter turnout, and it's a crisis that we have about 40% of the country determining who is able to lead us. And should we be comfortable with that going into 2024? It's definitely a question that we want to be able to ponder on and, of course, resolve as civil society.
Yeah, and I'm glad you raised that point, because it's leading to my next question around cadre deployment. And even when you mention, the National Assembly, the buzzword cadre deployment has been debated around so much around whether or not it still has a place in our democracy. It seems that those who are implicated in corruption are not held accountable, and those who may be seen to be wanting to root out corruption are either reshuffled or not, supported enough. What's your stance on cadre deployment and its place in our democracy?
Yeah, I think the sort of party politicization of the word, of the phrase cadre deployment is unfortunate. I think there's genuinely a place for deploying individuals, particularly in a representative democracy, a proportional representative democracy. So parties have to be able to send people into spaces of governance that they believe have the ability to carry out the ideology or the manifesto that's contained in those in those spaces. Of course, it's important for political parties then to look at the quality of cadre that they put forward, so that they ensure that that individual has the ability to carry forth not just the interests of the political party, but they have the ability to carry forth the work of those institutions that they're being deployed to. And in the instance that the cadre fails, they also have to be very public admonishing from the political party, but also consequences that have to be carried out, not just from a party political perspective, but from an institutional perspective. And that's the gaps that we've been missing in these instances. I think that it's difficult for anyone who forms a government under the mandate provided to them by their own manifestos, by their own campaigning processes, to deploy someone that they don't necessarily have the ability to trust that will be able to carry out that ideology or that perspective. Right. But it's important then that that quality of that individual is one that we as a public also have the ability to back, because once you're in government, you're not just in government for your political party, but you're in government for the rest of society, as it were.
All right, well, I appreciate you speaking to us about this. Pamandla Mhlongo, Senior Programs Officer, Democracy Development Program. Thank you for your time this morning.